how has surf tourism developed since the exploitation of some of those Irish slabs? I mean,
You know,
I looked up waves where you live, and it looks epic,
yeah.
but I never really saw any of that stuff in magazines when I was growing up. Like Ireland just seemed totally off the surfing map until like Mullaghmore and the big slabby waves really came onto the scene. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious how
Well,
surfing has developed.
it's interesting because, obviously, even listening to your guys' podcasts, and you mentioned Mullaghmore every now and again, and Nathan Florence being over there and all that type of stuff. Like, I mean, that's happening all the time now. But it seems to be more happening in the big wave world rather than the everyday wave world, if you like. Performance surfing, we don't have contests or anything like that. The WSL or any of them guys, they're not anywhere near Ireland. I remember way back when I first started surfing, hearing whispers of the ASP back then saying that they wanted to come to a place called Bundoran and hold a contest, but all the locals were super against it for that reason exactly. Just overexposure and but also I think like the cold water puts so many people off. Everybody's like, oh, it's cold. How could you surf in Ireland? But let me tell you, when you're in Ireland, and I don't want to big it up too much, and you pull up and there's perfect waves, the last thing you're thinking about is the temperature of the water. Plus, wetsuit technology nowadays is so advanced that when you put a wetsuit on, you don't feel a thing. You really
Right.
don't. I mean, okay, there's days where if you spend an hour and a half in the water and the wind is blowing hard, whether, offshore winds blowing hard and the water is cold, for sure, after about an hour and a half, you're going to get cold, your feet are going to get numb, things like that. But again, you're like, well, just one more, just one more. That's kind of your mantra in your head. Oh, I'll just get that one last wave, and then I'll go in. But even my 12-year-old son now, like for the last kind of like year or two, he's been kind of going, oh, it's awful cold in Ireland, Daddy. But Barbados is so much nicer, and but now he's like, oh, but the waves in Ireland, Daddy, are so much better, and like there's so much less people, and doesn't matter, okay, we'll only surf for an hour. So, he's starting to see the wood through the trees now as well. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, but on saying that, it's definitely grown a huge amount. I think COVID has grown surfing everywhere in the world dramatically. Ireland is kind of no different in that way. But, people are sticking with it. That's the one thing I will say. A lot of people are sticking with it. I mean, our beach breaks are getting very crowded and very unorganized. And, there's no kind of like, again, Ireland is super friendly. So there's nobody out there going, hey, you're not supposed to be out here. You're supposed to be in there. Or, everybody's kind of just like, all right, just let him be. It's
Yeah.
very kind of relaxed in that manner. And I've kind of noticed traveling around the world and being in different places, surfing in different places, it's not like that everywhere.
Right.
So I think the Irish surfers are definitely getting an easy ride in comparison.
Are there any up and coming professional locals that whose names we should be aware of?
Well, I think the guy who's kind of made the most noise from Ireland across the scene is a guy called Garage McDade.
Okay.
He'd be kind of in his 30s now, or yeah, just turning 30. He's been incredible. He's kind of like was very much a contest for the first few years and then turned free surfer. But he's with Rip Curl, so he's had Mick Fanning in, and Tom Curran was just in with him recently, and they're kind of like hunting all the slabs around the country and stuff like that. There's a few young kids that are really good rippers. There's a young kid called Joshua Carbis. He's about 13, 14 now. He'd be kind of, chasing all the contests around Europe and stuff like that and doing really well. But yeah, I think there's not a huge amount of young kid surfers in Ireland. There's a huge amount of guys my age and kind of like maybe a few years younger. But I think as the years roll on, we're going to see more and more and more because now you have all the dads teaching their kids. And I think I'm probably one of those first generation dads starting to teach kids how to surf in Ireland. Whereas before, I don't really know there was, it just didn't really seem to happen. It just kind of, there seemed to be big gaps in age groups. You might have a little pod of Groms coming up and then there wouldn't be any for a long time. So I think it's becoming more consistent now. Plus, the internet, everything has changed, right? We all
Yeah.
know that, like how we consume everything, it's changed so much. So I think people are starting to see it now as way more kind of accessible than it was, 15, 20 years ago.
Um, Connor McGuire's Irish, isn't he?
He is indeed, yeah. So him and Garrod would be very good friends, and
Okay.
they kind of, they pal around together all the time and they're chasing everything together. So Connor and Garage, I would say Connor got that kind of like ginormous freak wave there. I think it was about a year ago or something like that now. But yeah, so they will be very much on par with each other. But there's a few other guys like that as well. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I think there's a few other guys kind of in that realm, kind of doing that type of thing. But it's all that really kind of heavy, slabby charging stuff. It's not kind of like competition surfing, if you know what I mean.
I do. I'm curious why there's never been a big breakout star pro surfer from Ireland.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's because nobody wants to leave. Like Maui has kind of had the same thing where
Okay.
Oahu generates all these like, they become world class, well known surfers, but Maui's generated a bunch of people who kind of get right to the cusp of that and then decide they don't want to go around the world chasing waves. They'd rather just stay home and surf great
Yeah.
waves. And so I think about, there's been a couple guys like Fergal Smith or whatever who like definitely have the talent and they make a splash, but then opt to just stay home just because it's probably so
Yeah.
beautiful and there's waves.
I suppose it's interesting in a way. I think a lot of these guys nowadays as well are realizing that in order to kind of go all the way, like I mean, what's all the way nowadays as well? Like to become a professional surfer, what's the pinnacle of that? Is it to be the next number one in the world? Like I don't know if there's a huge amount of money in that anymore. You
No.
know, so I think a lot of these guys are kind of seeing that and going, well, I'm better off being a free surfer, living in Ireland, chasing the waves that I want to chase. You know, I think it's just because everything has changed so much as well, that we're not seeing that hunger for like that chase to be the next world champ or whatever it may be.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is money in being number one, but being number five and below, there
Yeah.
isn't. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the haves and the have-nots. So yeah, being able to do it on your own terms and get great waves throughout the year and the peak of your surfing prime is probably the priority.
Yeah, absolutely.